Like, I just think that the rules are that we have to have 3.
Right.
I don't know if we can waive them at the table or.
Oh, yeah. I think when the decision comes into play, and I think we as chairpersons probably could agree to start if it's a mutual agreement. So
I'm open to that.
that's up to you, Mr. Regula.
Yeah.
Maybe discuss, but not take any.
Yeah, Tinny, we won't take any action. Are you okay with that?
Yeah,
Sounds great.
I'm okay with that.
Well, thank you, folks. Been busy. I know it's been busy for both of you, so. Thank you.
So good afternoon, folks. Today is February 28th. Tonight is already our 4th meeting, I believe, of Meet and Confer. And it is 4:21 and we will begin the meeting. So with that said, I'd like to welcome everybody once again to the Meet and Confer meeting. I think that we've all gotten to know each other and we've all played well. We continue to work with each other, collaborate. So I think there's a mutual understanding of the norms with respect to Meet and Confer. Let the record reflect that, thank you, Mr. Regula. I know that there are minus 2 members. And however, we will begin at least the meeting and we will not take any action without DC 18 having a quorum. That should be expected at any time. So with that said, I know that item E, meeting minutes, let the record reflect that the minutes, much like last time, will be reviewed at the subsequent meeting. That would be March 21st, if everyone's okay with that. There's no need for action at this point. Mr. Regula, are you okay with that, sir?
We're okay with that.
Okay, gotcha. So, beginning proposals. Here we are, folks. Again, 4th meeting, so we are prepared and to at least begin the conversation. And again, no action, but at least begin the conversation. Mr. Regula.
So we are on new proposals, correct?
Well, I see new proposals, but do we? I know I was sure. I don't know if I got the correct agenda. Because do you have new proposals? I guess I skipped that.
We do have.
Okay.
some new proposals.
All right. I apologize. I apologize. So new proposals, Mr. Regula, letter E.
So our first proposal is titled Change to Teacher Handbook Extra Duty Compensation. And as you can see on the front page, we are proposing raising the steps, the amount for each step by an average of $450. So from step 1, $1,100 to $1,500, step 2, $1,300 to $1,750, and step 3, $1,500 to $2,000. We also are proposing to change the language on the right-hand side, which used to read, beginning an extra pay assignment for the 3rd time without a break in services of more than 1 year. That was for step 2. Our concern with that language is that if a teacher does not coach or an employee does not coach for a year, they're then bumped back down to the bottom step or do not take on a leadership position. And in our eyes, after you've had 3 or more extra duty positions, you shouldn't be penalized for taking a short break and returning, because it's not like you lose the knowledge that you gained during that time. So in the rationale, you can see through my research, and maybe the district can let me know about this, I don't know if this has been increased since it came into play. I know it's been at least 20 years. It's been at least since the year 2000 since we have increased this. So if you look at that cost over time, especially if you look at inflation, and I didn't write this in the rationale, but you could certainly look this up. Inflation over time would bring $1,100 from the year 2000 to about $1,650. We're not even asking for that. The calculation for the cost of this proposal is listed in there. Essentially, we're estimating the cost to be around $220,000. And I have how we calculated that on there. And if you have any questions about that, please let me know. But basically, the idea is that we're trying to make sure that we're one, paying adequately for our extra duty positions, but also that we are showing our leaders that have stepped up to participate in these different activities that are going to really benefit our students and build relationships and make sure that they are being paid adequately for their time. So at $1,100 rate that currently stands, an average coach, what we've found through our research is that they're working on average about 75 hours, and that's a pretty conservative number. So what that equates to is about $15 an hour. And as you know, that's really where minimum wage, or we're really talking about minimum wage type of a pay. And even under our current proposal, it only would increase that hourly rate to $20 an hour. So we think this is a really reasonable proposal. These are some pretty conservative numbers. Really, the numbers should be higher if we were looking at the true value of this proposal when it was originally introduced. And we think that it's time for us to start paying our leaders fairly and to look at changing this extra duty pay.
Thank you, Mr. Wigala. Board team member, excuse me. Any questions, clarification points?
I'm glad to see that we're revisiting the extra pay for extra duty pay schedule, because the way that it's described and is very difficult to follow. I'm not sure that I could still articulate what that is, but I know that if you hold 2 contracts in 1 year, that counts as 2. It really doesn't have anything to do with the years, it's how many you have. And so I'm glad that we're able to look at the language. And if I understand correctly, on the step 2, it says for the 3rd time without a break in services of more than 1 year. So that would be, somebody would have to be offered 2 years before there would be that.
No, so the language that we're proposing is beginning on an employee's 3rd extra duty contract. So theoretically, if a teacher has stepped up in the 2nd, 3rd year or so forth, in 1 year they coached twice and they took on a team leader position, then they would be at step 2, right? Because it's really about the amount of time they're putting into these positions and the experience they're gaining over that time. It's not necessarily over the course of years, but so that language is similar. The thing that we're taking out is that if you take a break from it, that you get moved back down the schedule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just for my own clarification, where the original language says without a break in services of more than 1 year. So you could be a coach or have his contract, take a year off, you could come back and not be penalized for early.
Correct, and it is a kind of a strange language, and we think that this is a much clearer. You make it to this point, this is where you're at on the sets.
Mm-hmm. I think your rationale is solid.
Melanie Kogel, speaking to the chair. I'd like to apologize for my tardiness. I was taking them over ISS test across the way.
What? Can you excuse that?
I don't know, I finished it in 20 minutes, so we'll see. We also wanted to make sure that when including that language, that we didn't want to discount the experience that the teachers have gained, even if it's more than a break in a year. Because if I were to go back and coach softball again, I wouldn't lose any of that information and knowledge that I've gained. I'd have that better experience versus somebody who didn't have that prior experience. And so we just wanted to pay teachers a little more fairly and not have to worry about whether they've broken a year and have to go back and look for that, be technical.
And in terms of paying for this proposal, we even put in the rationale just one part of our budget that this could come from. So I mentioned this at the table before, but in the last year, we got $2.6 million from district additional assistance, which we put into, not into the M&O budget, into unrestricted capital is my belief. So I was looking at other districts, neighboring districts, and Phoenix Union actually put 75% of their district additional assistance into the M&O budget. Now, obviously, I don't know exactly what they spent that money on, but the point is that money can be put into M&O, and it really would only be, one-fifth of our district additional assistance, not even less than that, so 1/10 of our district additional assistance really to pay for this, which I believe is a small price to pay.
I would like to say, for the record, publicly, this would be richly and well-deserved for the work that's done. I also would compliment you because you have a cost analysis, very good. You even have a dedicated funding source. I like that. Now, on the other side of it though, I'm going to defer to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. OJ, who will be in the next session to discuss, the ramifications of district additional assistance and so forth. But anyway, yeah, I like that. I'm just not sure, on the other side of the hard financial reality, how that falls, but I like the proposal. Thank you.
I would like to just put this on record as well. When we're looking to the future Confer meetings, I think that it would be really, really beneficial to either have Mr. OJ come to more meetings and or have someone on the district's team who works in financial services so that we can have a discussion about where proposals are going to be paid from. Because we've had so I'm looking, so a total, what we've proposed to be added to the budget is around $500,000 between the lunch, the T for T, and the extra duty. And it's really hard to have a conversation about the possibility of these proposals without having someone from finance here. And I think that we're going to be talking about a lot of other financial situations such as salary in the future. So I don't know if that's something we can look at adding to the language, but I think it would be really beneficial to the negotiation if we had someone from financial services on the district side of the table.
So thank you, Mr. Wagella, for bringing those points up. They certainly are articulated well and documented and placed for the record. Yeah, once a coach, always a coach. So I think that when you look at these items in terms of extra duty pay and extra assignments, not specifically aligned to sports, but I mean, there's other duties and responsibilities that, again, as Dr. Murphy and others have mentioned, are aligned and certainly well worth the conversation. I think you're gonna get a lot of extra hours. Next, Dr. Murphy, yes, sir.
Thank you. If I might, I would suggest, yes, that's a good suggestion, Mr. Wagella, and Mr. OJ will be in next meeting, and typically makes appearances, if not every meeting after that, very frequently. So yes, I think certainly we can ensure that we have him here for any relevant discussion regarding any of those cost items. So he does tend to appear more at the sessions after he has presented the main financial proposals. So I will also discuss that with him. If may I be permitted just to take a bird walk, because I don't want to forget this, and it's not on the agenda, but just in response to the CEA team's questions regarding the insurance and benefits. The information that I received from our financial folks is this: that there is a meeting scheduled for our financial people with our benefits consultant, the Siegel Corporation. So they'll be holding that meeting, I believe, late next week. And then the full insurance committee will be convened after spring break. So you can anticipate that. So that's the answer to your question regarding the insurance. Thank you. I appreciate your letting me depart from the agenda, Mr. Chair.
Melanie
No, that's breaking news. Great commercial.
Melanie Coble speaking for the chair. I have just a couple of questions, maybe for Dr. Murphy. He might be better, more knowledgeable in this, since you were the one who spoke to Dr. or Mr. OJ. How will the committee be formed, be chosen? Are we maybe I'm just not knowledgeable of this. Maybe you don't have talked about this already, but how will they be chosen?
I'm sorry, but I don't have a good answer either. I've never sat on the committee or even, I may have attended once, but we can find that. Let me find that out. That's a good question. And I guess I assumed there was ongoing membership there, but obviously I'm sure we need to update that.
Pretty much a changing of the guard, probably.
Yeah, okay.
And how many teachers
Right.
they would like for us to select to sit on the committee?
Well, let me go back and seek that
Teachers and
information.
classified staff. I'm so sorry for
Okay. Let me go back and seek that information, but honestly, rather than, making something up, I will just say no, I'll find out. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Coles. So next, new proposal, classified handbook introduction, Mr. Miguel.
So one thing that we found while looking through the classified handbook is that there really isn't a strong introduction in place. And this proposal is simply trying to make sure that it is very clear what the handbook is going to be used for and what employees can find into the handbook. And when we were comparing our handbook with other neighboring districts, our classified handbook does not contain like an official introduction, and we just think that it might be nice to kind of beef up the classified handbook to provide clarity and make sure that everyone in our district feels the same respect as teachers do. And we think that classified handbook should really ultimately mirror the certified handbook. And you can see in our rationale that this proposal is about respect and inclusion, and I'm wondering if you have any questions on this proposal.
I don't have any questions, but I have, I think it's a celebratory statement, and again, I'm gonna be very honest here, as I have been in the past, in that I appreciate this language, and already, I'm not counting or taking score, but there's been 4 at least proposals that we are going to discuss, or at least have begun to discuss. Actually, just started with 2, this one right here. But as you move forward, I really thank you for that, because I've always said, and I know it started last year with Ms. Robertson's support and Ms. Morales, who was representing the classified support staff. So we've talked about that indirectly and somewhat formally, but I think it is important. I know that we just met, or we meet, myself and Mr. Hagan, primarily as Dr. Murphy allows us to meet with our HR staff. And obviously, as you know, most, if not all, are classified support staff. So I appreciate this effort. I think that it's time that we start cleaning up some of the messaging and the content, and quite frankly, that is what we're about. I know I've said that many times. This is not a infomercial, not a commercial, but an infomercial. I think you know where we stand, but I think that I think in terms of equitable, and we know equity isn't always equal, but we do know that it's important to celebrate, support, and really sustain that environment for our classified support staff. We've always done that, and I've always felt that, because I think last year I said this, I'll say it again this year, and that is that many of our classified support staff, and I know those words are used interchangeably, but really are eyes and ears of the community, because they live in the community. Not all of it, but most of it do. They take care of our schools, they take care of our facilities, they shop here. There are messengers, and I think that's very, very important to be able to do. So thank you for doing that. So this is
Betsy Ryan, if I may speak to the board, in the sense that I do feel if we can work out without constant proposals, having certain basic language mirrored in both handbooks would be, super exciting. Simple things like a voting toward regulations, a grievance process, calendar, the basic things that are exactly the same for all employees of our school district. If those could just be placed into both handbooks, if that's all right with you, instead of a consistent proposal for every little section. And I'm just talking about the general information, nothing big or broad. Well, broad, but not, Is that something the board could see themselves agreeing upon?
I think it's certainly, as a chairperson, I just quickly say, I think it's certainly open, and we're certainly open and receptive to, again, you're not specifying there's no specificity to this language, that language. You're just saying let's be consistent.
Yes.
When we can be consistent across the board, right?
Yes.
Do I get an A for that, or?
You know what, for today, I'm gonna go ahead and give you 99.
All right, okay.
Highly proficient.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Ms. Heck, I look over, you gonna make a statement? Okay, anybody else?
Melanie Kogels, sorry to interrupt, yeah. Melanie Kogels, speaking to the chair, point of personal privilege. I have to say that I'm very proud that we had Michelle last year who got this, Michelle and Ms. Morales who got this starting on the ball. And I'm very proud of Betsy Bryan too and her knowledge base. I love that new leadership has stepped up and tried to fill those really tough shoes too.
So with that said, Mr. Wagella, any final comments under new proposals? I know that, again, this is something that I think you saw, at least without, we're not ready, obviously, to take action, and nor are you indicating that, but if you can tell that we're open and receptive, we will discuss this with the right people, stakeholders, and we'll move forward, sir.
I think we are ready to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So with that said, next on the agenda item is pending proposals, 5.2. Well, actually, can I, because it's under pending proposals, I think we're allowed, actually, I know we're allowed to move it in. So I'm hoping, if you're okay, I want to celebrate and just get to like the representation piece. Can we move that up, Mr. Lavella?
Yes, I think that is agreeable.
Super. Go ahead.
So I know we spoke about this at each of the meetings so far, and my understanding was that we made the slight changes to the language, adding when possible, and I'm hoping that we can sign this proposal today.
Melanie Coble speaking for the chair. We also added the commas where Dr. Murphy specified he thought the commas were important and where they weren't. So you can see at the last, yeah, we omitted we omitted, oh no, it still says the instructional day. Oh no. Oh,
No, where you at?
I'm looking at the sentence that we're supposed to change.
Yeah, but is that the second paragraph then?
First paragraph, I believe. We had one possible instead of the instructional.
So it's the second paragraph, right? Third sentence?
Mm-hmm. Work date, comma, at the end of the instruction. Okay, it makes sense. Okay, added the comma after date. I'm remembering now. And everywhere that Dr. Murphy wanted us to change, we did.
Oh, yeah. This is comma.
Which wasn't much.
It wasn't a lot. It was very, but it was correct grammar.
So, any questions, board team?
I think you should sign.
I think we're ready to go and celebrating. So, yes, so with that said, there is a motion to approve proposal 8.0 representation as presented. Is there a motion? Oh, this is at the table, sorry, is there a motion to approve?
I motion to approve representation
I'll second.
8.0.
Okay, okay, so Ms. Bryan does second that motion. Any questions? With that said, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. So hey, let's celebrate. So 8.0, we will move forward. We will include this in the handbook, and we'll get going on it. Thank you. Thank you. So now we can go back to the top, Mr. Wagella, if you like, 5.2, or, we could discuss that.
So we can continue to discuss. I do feel that we have discussed this proposal at length, and I would just like to, I am hoping that we are going to receive a counter today, and I'm hopeful that we can come together and find something. I have continued to do research on this topic, and I do know that Glendale Elementary has a 40-minute duty-free lunch. And I would just like to, continue and kind of reiterate, to kind of just point out what I think are some, trying to find the right wording here, but that I think are some counterpoints to some of the main concerns from the district. The first, unless there is a proposal, a counter proposal today, otherwise this would be unnecessary.
So,
Here's where we're at, Mr. Wagella, in terms of, this is a tight space here, so I apologize, in terms of the 5.2 lunch proposed change to lunch minutes. Where we're currently at is that we have discussed this, and what we're prepared to do is to certainly keep the communication alive and well, and certainly we are receptive to reviewing this matter. Because again, I just want to highlight what was said to us by our administrative staff, our cohort of principals, assistant principals, and quite frankly, our, we haven't formally presented to the executive team, but in talking to a few members including Dr. Murphy, what we are prepared to do is we know that there's some pending matters that address this. One is the recess, the Arizona Revised Statute recess implementation execution piece that our schools are going through, as Ms. Heck spoke about already. We know that we've talked a little bit, our concerns, and you may be able to respond to this, Mr. Wagella, but of structured time, structured active time, if you will, without wordsmithing, just looking at not just, and I say this carefully, but not just an additional 10, 15 minutes, but how are we going to process that? How is that going to look? The other element that was brought up as recent as late last week, early this week, it's been a crazy week, sorry, it's been busy, is the heat factor of keeping students out there, as we don't have enough awnings or coverings, shade coverings. We've talked to, in talking to our principals and our administrators, many of them have been the liaisons to the community and parents, and they've, before this, have had concerns about listening to parents' concerns of heat and those related matters. We've talked about discipline in here being, we have reason to believe that the disciplinary data and referral rate will go up. Students eating lunchtime, or students eating time, enough time for students to eat during these times. I know when you presented this, there were some concerns with that, and you were voicing this, and I know that you shared that and you vetted this out with your colleagues. However, talking to administrative team members, they have not seen that under it. What they've seen altered schedules that have allowed for kids to eat later, mid or later, and that is that rather than, especially at the middle schools, Ms. Heck, am I correct?
Yes.
When they begin their lunch period, they don't always go in there right away, and that's just by choice, and that's strategic. What they'll do, they leave the students, they'll eat at the end of the period many times. So they haven't seen that. And again, I'm being the messenger here. So with that said, what we like to propose and counter is that we continue to discuss this, but that we suspend this conversation and or table it until next year, so that next year, the 1920 school year, the other piece of this is that, as you know, that Ms. Heck presented some schedules already that are aligning to 40-minute lunch periods, and I mean, there's some inconsistencies, we understand that, but I think that what we're doing at our schools is they're supporting their own autonomy, their own decentralized leadership by allowing rotations. I think Mr. Vogella pointed to that in the presentation that Ms. Heck mentioned or addressed last at one of the previous sessions. So as we move forward, what we'd like to do is suspend this, table it, so that we could continue to discuss, review, and meet on this next year, which would allow I'm looking ahead, and again, I don't want to write a check I can't cash, but looking at developing a committee, coordinating some meeting times, scheduling some meeting times, coordinating an effort to review this matter in length and move forward. Anything else from me?
The other thing that I would add to support the recommendation for tabling this is the new law requiring a 15-minute recess. Until we're able to implement that, some schools may inherently end up with a longer lunch period because they do need to add additional recess time. And until we really know what that's going to look like, I think it might be a little premature to adopt this. The other consideration that I would offer is schools at this point appreciate the autonomy to make decisions on their site that are best for their site. And we see that some schools are already at the 45 minutes, and I would hope that there are processes in place for teachers to bring that through the leadership team to their administrators and enact change on their own campus when it is best suited for their campus.
So, I want to speak carefully here, but I do not believe that our team is willing to table this discussion till next year. It's something we'll definitely have to talk about, but I do think that, we do represent our members, and after speaking to members, this is probably, out of our proposals, this is at the top of their list. And we have a duty as a union, as an association, to continue to push this agenda. And I will point out that I think that there are some flaws in the district's rationale for wanting to table this and wanting to wait on this. Number one being the research that we've provided, that giving students extra time to eat is important. And I understand that at some campuses, students have maybe gone outside first and came in second. But that I know that at some campuses, they don't make their students sit down, which means that the students don't have to eat. There are several middle schools where that's happening, and that's not something as a district I think that is good for our students or our families, and I think we really need to consider this. The concerns that I have down here that the district had put up, and I want to propose a counter to those, the first one being instructional time. If instructional time is a concern, my question would be, then why do 5 or 4 schools already have a 45-minute lunch? And the district has not said anything about that. So if we're really concerned about losing instructional time, the district has allowed that to happen at other campuses. And now this brings me to my second point, the point of autonomy. There are plenty of things that the district already mandates schools to do, and I'll give you one example, is Achieve 3000, and I know that some campuses and some teachers do not want to do Achieve 3000. I'm not advocating here against Achieve 3000. I'm just simply making a point that autonomy has not been a concern in other areas, and I feel like this would not be under that guise, because as a district, when we're doing something that's good for the students and the staff, autonomy shouldn't be in that realm. The other thing was structure time. We have provided several solutions on this side of the table for recess to be structured. We've offered to have 4 days of a 45-minute lunch and 1 day of a 30-minute lunch where teachers are on duty for 15 minutes, allowing teachers to be out there with students, building relationships. We also see some schools that have structured lunches. Now, those programs might have a cost to them, but as we pointed out, we feel that there are plenty of places in the budget that we can pull money from to pay for this. So for one thing, I don't know if the district side of the table is aware of this, but food services transferred $1.5 million from their budget into an account called indirect costs. And that budget is sitting at a pretty healthy amount. So my question would be, what is that money being used for in indirect costs? My understanding is that is an account that is administrative services. But if there was $1.5 million from food services transferred into that account, couldn't that money be used to pay for monitors and to pay for maybe programs that are related and directly related to lunch? The next thing was the heat factor. All of our schools and campuses, my understanding, would have already have positions and things in place to where if it is too hot outside, there's a place for students to go inside. And I think that we could definitely work out a schedule around that. So emergency schedules, right? So just like a rainy day schedule. And then the discipline, I would definitely question what data have we looked at the schools that have 45-minute lunches and compared them, because when we're making a claim that there's data that's going to show that discipline issues will go up, I think you need to support that with evidence. And ultimately, when you think about staff, when our staff is well rested and our staff has time to eat their lunches and has time to also take care of business during lunch, that is only going to benefit everybody on the campus. That is going to make sure that our teachers are well rested and that our students are getting the care that they need, that we have teachers that have felt that they had the time to use the restroom and so forth. And we've already talked about middle schools and how some of them have less than a 50% fill rate. This provides time to use the restroom when you can't, when you're covering. I think there are a lot of really good points that we're making here. And with the recess law, that law has been in place this year. I would like to have seen that. We know that some schools have been struggling to have that work efficiently, and I think that it's something that we can do. I don't think that we should be looking at this as that we need to table this. There are districts that have longer duty-free lunches, and I think that all of the counters I just presented, unless you can maybe convince us otherwise, I think are really, really strong points, and there's a lot of support for this.
May I? Dylan,
I lost
so,
Mike.
when we, met with the administrative team, first and foremost, what came out of that discussion was the appreciation that you are looking at this from a student perspective. So I don't think there was any administrator there who didn't appreciate the fact that we're trying to put kids first. That's what we're here for, that's our job. So as our conversation developed and it was around monitors, schedules, money, programs, there appeared to be many decisions that needed to be made, and so our stance was, this is a big change for many schools, and we would like to do it right. So we would like to do more research, find out what works, what doesn't work, what is cost effective, what's not, and then make decisions that will benefit all the kids at all the schools. And our belief was, if we had stakeholders from not only from the teacher's perspective, but from the administration, food services was included in our conversation. From many different avenues, we felt like that we could come up with the best possible solution and have the time to do so and not be rushed to make a decision and a change that would be difficult, I think, for all schools to have happen at the beginning of the school year. And I know I spoke about Playworks, and I apologize, I misspoke to the price. I actually talked to Rebecca Limekeeler, the principal at Holiday Park, and her cost is actually $15,000 for the program they have, and it is not what you would call the Cadillac. It's like a middle of the road type support. So that, I just wanted to let you know that's where our conversations stem from.
So I just would like to point out that if the district, and I know that no decision has been made on this, that the district is truly thinking about making a change in their current model and structure of our schools from 6th grade to K-6, and we feel that we can do that and make that change in the amount of time that's been given to that. I see no reason why a lunch, a 15-minute extended lunch for some campuses when we already have models in place couldn't be done. I really don't see the logic behind that.
And while Nicole was speaking to the chair, I think it would be a very good idea to survey the staff and have the district survey the staff, asking them confidentially if their 30-minute block of time is being honored regularly. I was just speaking to some teachers anecdotally today, and they were telling me that on a regular basis they don't get 30 minutes of lunch. And depending on certain campuses and newness of teaching and their willingness to speak to things and their sacrifice and love of kids, they are either worried or nervous about expressing that not having that lunchtime. So I think it would be very important to survey the staff and see what they're truly concerned about, and then you will be able to see that it is actually an urgent matter, that they're not able to eat and go to the bathroom in that time frame. So, and that's troubling, because you're right. We did approach this with looking at what's best for students, and adding to that, what's also best for students is happy, healthy teachers who are able to eat and think clearly and process, because they were able to both go to the bathroom and eat their lunch at a normal pace.
So I can just speak for myself. So at my middle school, we have a system set up for lunch detention, right? And one thing that I do, and I'm a team leader at my campus, and this is not something I have to do, and I'm well aware of that based on our current language in the handbook. But what I do is I assist the monitors each day into getting the students that have to serve lunch detention in there. So by the time I take my students to lunch, help the monitors get the students into the right place, because that's just simply, in my opinion, for me, what feels like is the right thing to do. And then go get my lunch and then sit down. I have about 15 to 20 minutes to eat my lunch. And that's just a teacher perspective. And we're one of the schools that have a 30-minute lunch. But I also see, last year, we just switched this year to making sure that students do sit down in their lunches and make sure that they do eat, and they have to stay there for 15 minutes. Now, the Harvard study we mentioned that it should be about 20 minutes, but I know at some campuses, there is no procedure for students having to sit down, and I've reached out to some of our site leaders, and they talk about the students going out to recess before lunch, and then when the whistle blows, by the time they get through the line, the students are left with about 5 to 10 minutes to eat their lunch. So I think this is something that we need to look at now, and that we need to continue this discussion on. I don't know if that's today, or if you're willing to take one more look at this, and we can talk about it at a further meeting. But I don't know how else from our side. We presented 500 signatures in support. We've gotten a letter that has talked about the benefits. We've presented some really clear places to take the money and pay for this. We've also presented different models, and we know that schools are doing this, and to me, it's just not lining up in my head as to why this isn't being signed, and I would really, really encourage the district's team to look at this again, this year.
Okay, points well taken. Anything else from the board team? So with that said, we will obviously we'll look at it. Again, this is what I'm sharing with you. I don't think in the spirit of time that we continue to discuss it today, if you're okay with that, only because I don't want to be accused of not having enough time to go through the other proposals. So I think it's important that but again, please, I think that Ms. Heck mentioned this already, and I hope we're sincere about not only this process, but we get it. We know that we're talking about students. This team has never said this is not about students, but we know where you're coming from, but so are our administrators. Just recognize that, please. That our administrators are out there, they're working, much like you, of course. You're right in the trenches, you see these things happen. But again, we did have a candid, open conversation about these steps, so thank you. So next is length of school day. Is that correct?
I think it's teachers as substitutes as well.
Oh, no, you know what? I thought I do have that.
I know we jumped around a little.
Teachers as substitutes. So we do have a counter, and I will walk over there with some updates.
Oh, you did very nice, color. Opposed to the not nice color?
So I will quickly begin, and the team will jump in and interject. So, number one. So number one, we struck out your language, if you will. This is going to be aligned to some compensation, additional budget items. So right now we cannot, and this is all respectful, support that piece. So just let me go through this, and then, if you don't mind, in terms of format and really what we're doing here, team board members could intervene and interject, excuse me, and then Mr. Regala, your team could add. Number two, we certainly do believe that you as teachers and support staff members should know what a process would look like and how it should be, what steps should be followed in terms of substitutes, and when we need to work with substitutes and assign substitutes. So certainly, but we don't think that a majority vote or should be part of the process. We do think that it's important to share with each and every one of you prior to the school year what the process will be, how it looks, and as we move forward. Number three, this is difficult. Number three is really about our support staff in terms of not aligning any more duties to our front office. I think it's safe to say, folks, And you know this, and again, I don't misinterpret this by indicating or trying to insinuate that you're not thinking this, but front office help is very, very, they're overwhelmed day in, day out. So for us, or an administrator to assume those responsibilities of filling out the time cards, we felt that would be difficult as we submit the documentation for pay. Please.
I'm confused. Everything's crossed out in 1. Everything's crossed out in 3. What's left?
So,
I'm not sure what we're proposing.
well, I want to go back to that. So, yeah, I'm not done. So as we continue, what I'm working on right now is to highlight the boldface pieces that you've added to the language or that you've modified. That's what I'm doing now. I don't want to go back. So as we move forward, number 7 for, as we move forward, I apologize. As we move to number 10, right now, as we speak, we are open and receptive with the caveat that we will be speaking to our chief financial officer of possibly looking at that rate increase of $200 after, or if there's a vacancy on the campus. So this primarily, and it's indicated there that would be a vacancy, a vacant position, not a sub, but a vacancy. So if we were to change that as you propose from $125 to $200, then certainly we would consider that, because when we did the informal computation, we realized that that's about the starting pay of a first year teacher, give or take, if you will. If you worked it all the way to the end of the school year in terms of the number of days taught and the daily rate of pay. So now as I go back, the pieces that Dr. Murphy was referring to, those, as you can see, number 1, the boldface pieces, and I know you know this is what you propose. What we're proposing is that we keep the language as is under number 1. So under number 1, you have you deleted the first piece, as you can see, not the non-boldface, which is the original language. We are entertaining the thought of and proposing that we keep that as is, along with number 2 and number 3. And then I will defer, and the rest of the team members could jump in. So once again, as I look at teachers as substitute, the highlight here is that, or at least the talking points, is that we're open, in no particular order, but we are open after talking to our chief financial officer, looking at that $200 rate of pay divvied up under the final point of teacher vacancy. We cannot support at this time additional work in terms of submission of documentation by the principal and or designee, because usually it's the support staff, not always, but usually. And again, the first part, the big other part, was the increase to $35 per scheduled class period. Additional comments?
Sorry, I know I'm kind of interrupting here. We just got information that there's no sound on the live stream. So I just wanted to make sure that we are recording the audio as well, so that in that event we can make sure that somehow get that out. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I'm not thinking, thanks for.
Should I wait or move on?
I think we'll continue, hopefully we could.
I think it's okay to move on, because it is being recorded via audio, and we have prints, so.
Thanks, Mr.
As we were working together preparing the counter proposals, I wasn't clear on number 4 and on number 6. You strike class and replace it with students. What's the difference between someone's class and their students?
So I think that language, and my team hopefully will correct me if I'm wrong here, was to be aligned with the proposal that had been stricken out in this counter proposal, classified staff having double duty. So if you have class in there, it might not apply in our minds to a parapro who's in a class and has extra students in there, so that your normal amount of students, if that was, if you had an additional students in there, that's where we were going with that. That's what I believe, correct, Betsy?
Yes, we're trying to keep up with the consistency of that. I can use an example today at our school. We had teachers up here training, so all of their classes were placed into other classes. We also had a number of techs out. So even though you would think that there'd be extra techs, that weren't. So the techs that were in the classes that received the extra students had extra duty. And in a forthright scenario, when we talk about simply class load, whether it be classified or certified, it's still increasing the class load. I don't think any one of you would come up to me and say, oh, well, we increased this teacher's class load, but you're not responsible for those other kids. I don't think that would be words ever said. So therefore, an increase in class load that affects each and everyone on the faculty should be considered as part of a substitute and possibly receive some kind of substitute rate.
And I certainly appreciate the role of the classified staff, but only for clarification, this is the teacher handbook versus the classified handbook, and so would this be relevant for teachers when the language really is addressing classified?
I think we kind of addressed that earlier on certain subjects, mirroring. We're talking about substituting, period, whether it be, and you're not going to have a bus driver come in and substitute in a classroom. So therefore, it's not going to apply to that person. We're talking about the basic language here. What is considered substituting, what is considered double duty, what is considered extra class load. So when you increase the student count on any body, they should be allowed to place in for those substitute dollars. Now, if you'd like, I don't have a problem writing up a separate proposal for classified, if that's what you would prefer. But once again, we are stating it's just mirror language.
Betsy, I may need a little clarification. I'm wondering if this is somewhat site-specific, because I know, like at my campus, when we split classes, we split amongst our certified staff. And then the kids who are like pulled out for intervention or that still go at their assigned time. So then my instructional staff, my classified employees in that role wouldn't necessarily have additional kids by virtue of how we split. But I'm wondering if that's different at other places. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying.
Okay.
What you don't see doesn't happen. And I don't mean that in a bad,
No, I just want to understand it, right?
because that's for all of us, right?
Right.
It's not a site-specific.
Mhm.
I have talked to other people in a similar position as mine, and it's not site-specific. It depends. If a classroom has a paraeducator assigned to them,
Mhm.
then they're getting that class load. If that paraeducator is responsible for taking both classes out to PE or wherever they're taking them specifically, that's increased the class load. Those are my students as well as anybody else's students. And I'm just as much of a stakeholder as anyone else that's on the campus. And if you don't think I'm caring about the students the way that certified staff is or my administrators are, then I'm sorry, you are a mistake. So I'm just asking for something that would be equitable and fair. We're doing the exact same thing that my coworker that I'm standing next to was doing.
So would you have the kids all day? Would this be like certain parts of the day? Like I know you spoke about recess, and again, I'm just seeking to understand what your experience is, what this is.
Okay, if you're asking for an experience, I will come back to being site-specific. During the day, our techs are each assigned a classroom. Class B goes into Class A, and there's just the one tech and the one teacher. So during that course of the day, that tech is working with the teacher until specials. Well, actually, we've kind of changed that now. but previously our specials were PE, art, and so forth. And during the PE time, the tech was responsible for that 50 minutes using the PlayWorks book. As of now, we obviously have somebody different, but we would take out both classes during that 50-minute period. We would take out both classes during recess, we would take out both classes to lunches, which is double dutying us at each of those periods. We spend over 95% of our time with our students, which is, our teachers need their prep period. They need to make sure that they're ready for the day and they're ready for the students. They need to have their lunch as well as anybody else. So it's not like we're, trying to reach into the pocket and say, oh, we deserve this too. We've earned it. And we've earned it just as well as anybody else.
And again, I'm just seeking clarification about kind of what's happening so I can wrap my head around
Do you
the
have
experience.
Do you have any educational support professionals that you move from position to position to cover? Like, do you by any chance, I'm gonna throw it way out there, do you pull a monitor to come in and maybe help in the cafeteria? I'm just asking, because that's not subbing or double duty,
Right.
but at the same time, we find the need for a classified personnel to do more than one job category.
Okay.
And so are those things that happen at your site, or is that just a site-specific thing that I've seen?
I don't think it maybe happens as often as ours, or if we ask them to switch a role, they're doing the alternate role and not both roles.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because I only have them so many hours a day, so we try to utilize them the way that they're scheduled.
And
so
then the
that
job
they-
classification.
Right, exactly, and then our job classification and our instructional assistants, we have predominantly self-contained. So I don't have the wherewithal to even pull those people because they need to be in the class they're supposed to be in, because those kids need the extra support. So that's why I'm saying, I'm just trying to wrap my head around the experience so I can, not that I'm saying you're not deserving of it, just so I have an understanding.
And I actually have more questions than I had earlier. And I understand we're only changing one word, so I don't know that this warrants, a lengthy conversation. But now I just am curious to understand, one, is this teacher driven or is this classified staff driven? And then I'm just curious to know more, not necessarily here, but I guess if I can just ask a yes or no question, are you, when you take students to electives or support a class, are you the sole adult supervising those students?
I can tell you not in all cases, because sometimes there are true techs assigned to a class, but previously, especially up until we received a PE teacher, yes. I was the only adult, as was other techs at my school. Yes, I was the only adult that had them at recess. Yes, I was the only adult that had them at lunch. None of this applies to me anymore, as I have been moved to a different room. So I'm doing this for all of our support professionals out there that have come across this particular scenario, because this no longer applies to me.
And so maybe just a recommendation, it sounds like it is a significant enough concern or issue that probably might warrant separate language, a separate document that would be specific for the classified handbook, something that would spell, rather than changing one word when it's a much bigger concern than the one word change. Because what I saw is one word. When I listened to your story, it's significantly more than that.
Thank you.
Probably not me. A couple of points. Monica was speaking to the chair. First is, I think that it's important to, I know it's just a simple word, just one word, but I think it's important to also mirror, we're talking about mirroring, making common language with a common understanding. So that's just why we would like to continue to change the word in class with students. And also, I think it's also important to note that when we're looking at proposal, we're getting Betsy's classified knowledge classify knowledge into consideration when looking at this too, because it just gives a different perspective that she views from her teachers as well. So, yeah, we are wall to wall, so we always take all the considerations, you know, we're looking at an aspect of the admin, we're looking at it through the eyes of the teachers, through the eyes of the students, through the eyes of our support, our parapros. So, and that's why we came up with wordsmithing this the way that we did. And I think it's also so important to note that even though we may be, this may only pertain to one site or one location, or maybe even one team or even one teacher, I think it's important to strengthen the language, make a common understanding, so that we all know when this situation does occur, that we're all operating under the same fashion. That there's no question about what our responsibilities are and what they aren't. That there's a formal process and no mistakes are made. My fear in looking at this is that teachers are not getting paid when they actually are substituting or taking on, or teaching as substitutes.
So I know your original question, I think, Mr. Hagan, was why did we propose this into the certified handbook? So I think that's a great question. Looking at the table of contents of both, the meet and confer procedures are not outlined in the classified handbook. They're outlined in the certified handbook. And one of the things it says is the scope, right? So what we can propose on what we can't. And one of the things it says in the scope is it says that things that are in this handbook or that have been negotiated recently. Double duty is not mentioned in here, but we have it in here. So I think that's kind of where our mind is at, is that this and that's kind of the confusion. Like meet and confer agreement isn't even mentioned in the classified handbook, but it's in the certified handbook is my understanding. But I think also looking at the counter proposal, so if I have some questions with the first part, so the proposal is to keep the rate the same, correct?
That is correct.
And what is the rationale behind that?
Well, the rationale is that it's a cost,
Sorry, can we use the microphone just because we have the recording device?
So the rationale is that it's a cost element, and again, I know you've cited multiple times these other revenues that are coming in and/or buckets of money that we could look at, but at this point in time, we're not prepared to move, only because that particular, as you know, that particular sub rate was raised, I believe it was 2 years ago, from $85 to $115, and so again, because of the cost issue.
So I think that the point is kind of made right there, is that teachers are not substitutes, and teachers should not be paid as substitutes. And that's the point we were making, and like I mentioned, so just, you know, I know I keep talking about these funds, but I think it's important for people watching and people hearing in the minutes to know that we're providing places to fund this. So even if we didn't use 2018 district additional assistance, the estimation is that the district's gonna get another $800,000 for district additional assistance. And teachers, again, are being paid less than if you were to do an hourly calculation. Teachers are being paid less than their hourly worth to do what is essentially forced overtime, because it is an emergency scenario where you cannot say, no, I'm not going to cover that class. And not that we would want to do that anyway. But the point is that if we want to retain teachers, which is an interest for students, for teachers, and actually what I've just found out is an interest for our budget, because of the teacher experience index, is that the more experienced teachers we have, in fact, the more money we get as a district. This is a proposal that is going to pay dividends over the long run, which I think is what we're looking at. And to strike out any of the language that is related to that increase, which is really the main focus of the proposal, isn't really a counter proposal in my mind, but I do, and I think we can go forward and we can make some of these things happen. But I would like this to be, you know, let's talk about the things that we do agree on in here. Like I do, and just I got an update. Sorry, I just distracted my mind. Is that the live stream's still not working? But with the number 3, sorry. To us, one of the things we were hoping what this language would do would kind of make the district look into an online process of we have an absent management system. Is it not possible to find an online process for time cards and
So can I interrupt you only to share with you, because,
Yeah.
I mean, you hit a trigger point, sir, and that is a yes already. We are looking into that. I know that in the future, the ESOP enhancements are being looked at. As a matter of fact, tomorrow, CEA team, we, a cohort of myself, a couple HR representatives of business services will be visiting a sister district to look at some upgrades. So that's a possibility as we move. So go ahead, I'm sorry.
I also I would advocate and kind of question as to why a vote wouldn't be a system that what's the opposition to the vote, I guess is my question in terms of number 2.
I could share with you that in talking to the principals, they feel very comfortable with their respective staff members on their respective campuses, and they feel that they've done their due diligence in working with all employees to make sure that they, and they probably could do better, they said, but in terms of at least sharing with them how and what that system would look like versus a vote. They felt that a vote would be a little more adversarial. At least the sense would be that, and it's not, and again, this is just me articulating this, so I'm here.
So,
Okay, so I'm answering your question.
Yeah.
So I know it's long-winded, but let me finish. So with that said, Mr. Miguel, I think it's more of a, we've talked about morale and climate building. What we want to do is make sure that in conveying this to our administrators, that they're doing everything they can to share this information, that there's a collaborative effort to say, hey, here's our rotation system, here's how it looks, this is what you can expect, here's what we're going to do, versus a vote where it becomes somewhat positional. I think they felt that they feel very comfortable with their respective staffs. So that was a compliment actually to the staff members that they have on their campuses. That was from the admin. I don't know, Jan, if I captured that.
And Jill and I apologize. I think when we had spoken, where it says this system should be shared with the staff, we would be very okay with the language, this system will be shared with the staff prior to school starting. And I know in the administrator meeting that we had, we were talking, I think some of the concern was that oftentimes there are going to be exceptions to the rule. So we could say, here's what our system's going to be, like at a K-5 campus, typically we split between possibly 2 grade levels, the one below, the one above, being the case. Unless the grade level that's affected or whatever, it might have 2 teachers out in the same team. Well, then that makes the splitting look a little bit different. So because of those caveats and exceptions, we were very comfortable saying, here's our general system, this is our plan to do business, and only in case, again, of an exception or an emergency. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense. I would contend that when you have staff, when you elicit staff feedback and you let staff make more decisions, such as voting on this particular kind of thing, you're going to get more buy-in from your staff, and I think that's because they're part of the decision-making process. But I can understand where the district is coming with this. I just would, maybe it's just the way that our brains work is that, this is our school, right? Teachers are the ones that make the school, and classified are the ones that make the school run. And they should have a say in how, these kind of situations are going, and maybe a voting would then take away, because this right here with this could develop a system. I know the language in there is it needs to be equitable, but could be developed a less than ideal system for the staff, right? And it also provides staff to kind of, guide how this is gonna look, and I think that's important. But I do wanna point out in terms of number 10, we can switch gears. I do like that this is in here, but I have some questions. What is the threshold for this to be taken into place currently? So, for example, at Atkinson Middle School this year, we have had 4 teachers and positions and classrooms collapse yet no one has received a time card yet because of a threshold, I think it's 10% above the average. I'm looking for clarity on that. And where is that language that we can find, and can we add language into this that maybe solves that problem? Because when we're talking about teacher vacancies, in my mind, if 4 classrooms that were at the beginning of the year aren't there, that's classroom vacancy. The district's not paying those positions anymore. So what is the threshold currently, and would the district consider adding that language into the handbook so that everyone has that available?
So the threshold you're referring to, Mr. Magella, is a staffing threshold that you're correct is not in the handbook, and it is a 10% threshold pretty much. So what we try to do is do everything we can to capture our staffing parameters, and that they're all within the 10% of that threshold. So kindergarten 2021, if you have that, obviously 4 kindergarten classrooms at 100, but they're at 105, so 10% of 100 is obviously 110. So we're within that threshold. And what we try to do is, what we do actually in working with our principals is that they make sure that there's an equitable disbursement, for lack of a better way of putting it, of staffing. So we're one kindergarten teacher may have 27, the other will have 25, and it just kind of works itself out there. So yes, that has happened, and again, we've done everything we can to stay within that threshold when we staff. When we just staffed 2 weeks ago, we just had meetings 2 weeks ago to prepare for 19-20 school year. So
I just also, something that happens when classrooms are collapsed is that teachers are then teaching more than one content, or more than one content that they're familiar with. If we're going to continue to look at this proposal, I know our original proposal did not include this language, but a lot of it was because we didn't know what that threshold was, and I think it's something that we should put in the handbook, and something we could look at. But I think the main concern coming from my team here is that the compensation aspect of this it was just excluded from the counter proposal. And then also with the process for time cards and how that's going to look, because again, this isn't a choice. We're aware of that. It's not like, hey, who wants to cover, come cover. There's an emergency, and we need to take care of our kids. But there is also, to get it put out the responsibility on the teacher for filling out the time card, I just don't think is fair.
Melanie Coble speaking for the chair. In the process of the time card and record keeping, I know we're looking at different processes and maybe possibly upgrading. But I also think it's important to note that regardless, there needs to be some sort of language in here so that the teachers know what their actual responsibility is, and the other staff need to know what that responsibility is so that we can make sure that they're getting paid. So even if we decide to go through a new process, I think that language needs to be developed and put into place, just so that we know where the responsibility lies. And I think we can always come to an agreement on how that might look, just so that it's very clear, and it wouldn't really matter where I teach the following year, because the process is always the same. I know at some certain schools, again, the secretarial staff takes it upon themselves to fill out the time card, and then all we have to do is sign it. It's beautiful for me, to be honest with you, but I know that's not occurring at other sites. And then we're also hearing word that some teachers are not getting paid because one person isn't filling out the time card, so it's stalling the payment for everybody else, which is not just happening at one campus, it's happening at multiple campuses. So just so that we can streamline the process, make sure everybody's getting compensated for the time, even in accordance to the handbook, or lack of not getting paid at all because they don't know the process of turning in the time card. It's just important that there's a clear language so that no matter where we go, everybody knows their roles and responsibilities.
So, Ms. Coble, I get that, and you're absolutely correct. I don't know if it's a meet and confer item, and again, I don't mean that disrespectfully. What I mean is that it could certainly be a regulation, a template, a consistent template that we use across the board. I know that in talking to the admin group the other day, Ms. Heck, again, I believe there was a couple anecdotal, updates from respective campuses say, I pretty much said that my secretary or my assistant, the front office staff, or whoever's the designee is, they send a template to that person and all they gotta do is click on and do this and that, and so, those kind of things. But certainly, we're open to that, that's not out of the question. I do wanna say this, and that is that, one thing we've always done, whether it's HR and business services, and/or business services and HR, and that is that we've had situations where people, employees for what have said, I didn't get paid. I didn't get paid from 4 weeks ago, and it was my fault. And what we've never done and never will, and we never, so I know that sometimes we've actually chuckled a few times, say, hey, I think you just waited so you could kind of get a bigger check. Oh, no, I didn't. But again, we're sensitive to that. It's your budget. It's everyone's respective budget. So we'll do everything we can to, as you said in your word, streamline the process. And I know that Ms. Hex, maybe it's your front office. Maybe it's Linda that does that, but I know they sent out a template or so.
I think there were many schools who said they do like a mock-up, and then all the teacher has to do is put in the date and their.
Absolutely, I think this is such a beautiful idea too, to have a template and everybody knows the streamlined process. I think it's such a great idea. And I would never, for one minute, suggest that you guys haven't paid when it's been called to attention. Of course, absolutely. And that's never been told to me either. However, I do think that because it is involving compensation, and working conditions and what we're supposed to do, I think it absolutely needs to be in the handbook. It's compensation.
Okay.
I think we should continue to look at this proposal and maybe something changes after the salary presentation, but at this point, I'm not going to say we're not going to sign this right now, but I think it's something we really need to go back and look at. But again, the big concern that is the compensation piece, and then it also just completely eliminates our concerns for classified staff on here. And I think that this is something we should look at. This is also something that received a lot of signatures for and has a lot of support for, and there are districts that are paying more than we're paying for this. And again, sub-pay is not the same as what teachers should be paid for their time. And we need to recognize that as a district. And honestly, I know a lot of especially at the middle school level, because this is where this problem is really happening. A lot of educators in our district that are leaving our district because of these things. So it is something that we need to figure something out, and I think that this is one way to do it, and retain our teachers and also pay them what they should be paid for their time. And this is also another proposal that has a lot of support. So I would ask that the district comes back and maybe counter proposals again, or I don't know at this point if you come back with something that maybe meets us more in the middle. I would like to see that some of that compensation piece stay in there at least.
So based on what you just shared, Mr. Wiggle, if we could do both, if you could review that as a team and see if there's any counters, in the meantime, we'll review it once again, sir. And again, I'm gonna end on this point if I let her get it.
No.
Yes, sir. So, I just don't want to be rude. So as we move forward, I think what's important is that please, again, I overuse this word respect, but I want to use it again. Last time we brought up the issue, the root of the issue is the absences, number of absences. Okay, it's not one particular group. You're nodding your head, Mr. Regella. Please dismiss it, please. Because that last time it was actually, what was said or what was framed is that I think the words were actually, and I wrote them down, were that we don't want our teachers to be shamed. That's something that I would never ever do. And I know that the team would never ever do that. So I'm very cognizant and sensitive to that because that's not what even this conversation's about. Please understand. And when I say absences, I don't mean middle school, K-5, I mean all across the board. And the record will reflect that. I've said that before. Mondays and Fridays are difficult. Now you could use that same point or position. Hey, that's across the board. Well said. And that's in the business service. That's in the outside world too. That happens. And I get that, and I wouldn't argue that. I just know that when it impacts our students, we as administrators, we as site administrators have to do or try to cover these classes. So the bottom line is, I know that when we're doing everything we can to meet our fill rate, which is not where we want it to be. And I recognize that, because it affects you, sir, it affects your team, it affects the classified support staff. But again, I know that when we have these absences, that's all I'm saying. There's not, and I'm very confident in saying that again. It's not a misinterpretation of that, oh yeah, I'm not saying this group's all they're doing is taking time off and hanging out. It's not what I'm saying. But I do know that it's a problem, and we have to do what's right. And maybe it's through some morale things, some climate things that you talked about, climate and culture. I just know that we've done everything we could, and I'm not personalizing this, I'm just saying on your behalf, as an HR department, we've done everything we could, and will continue to do, sir, and it's our job, to hire guest teachers, we've done some creative things. You talked anecdotally about some episodes you've had, and I think we've talked about those matters already. Ms. Copels has done that. Well, we too have done everything we can to be creative, and I think you mentioned your school. We've done everything we could to be creative there, and we continue to do that. I'm not, trying to say that, hey, we're the best things in sliced bread in terms of our department, but we'll continue to do that, sir. I'm just, again, saying that we know this is a problem, we know it's a sensitive issue, and I also know that it's not always about pay, and I'm not looking at you saying that all we want is more money. That's not what I'm saying. So I get that.
So, maybe this is, want to speak carefully here. So, last week, as that word had come out of my mouth, I had kind of walked it back. But I think that's not the right word, but I think we need to be very careful, and I will say this again when we're talking about this issue, because while absenteeism may be an issue, I don't think it's fair to assume, and I'm not saying that you are, but assume why people are out. And our handbook does talk about what sick days and personal days can be used for, and it is important to know that teachers obviously have families and they have children, and there are different reasons they're out. But I think what is the counter I want to say to what you've said here is, although there may be high absenteeism rates, the people that are punished by not getting paid this are the ones that are going, and the ones that we want to stay, and the ones that are dedicating their lives to this district. And I think that's the idea of raising this compensation, is that when people have to pick up the slack of others for family reasons, for mental health reasons, and anything under that umbrella, it's really important that we show them the respect. And that's where I'm coming from. And I think this is not about how HR has done anything this year. This is about how can we move forward as a district and make sure that we are retaining the best teachers.
Thank you. That's
Melanie
on purpose. Absolutely. Thank you. Go ahead.
Melanie Coble speaking to the chair. In looking at the data, I think it was very informative to see the amount of absences are taken every year, and it's astounding when you think about that number. And I wouldn't want to, we personally suggest, and the team suggests, that we're shaming anybody for taking their days. I don't think that was ever a thought that entered our mind. I would like to point out that one of the major reasons for teachers wanting a higher number monetarily is so that when they go home tired and exhausted from the extra workload, they want to come back the next day. And we're hoping that it would also trigger a healthier sense and feeling about their self-worth, and also in turn help with their health, and not want to take a sick or a mental health day because they're so worn out that they feel like that they're valued. If that makes sense. I mean, there has to be staff that we're talking about all variables and bring all variables to bring them all to the table. We absolutely have to look at how that affects them mentally when it happens and it occurs over a period of time, over and over and over and over and over again. And sometimes, unfortunately, to the same team, and unfortunately, sometimes to the same grade level band. That just happens with this life, and I think we take into account, and we were very, as a bunch, just for sure you guys know, we're very sensitive folks. We really care about our team members, and we do a lot of favors for our team members, and I just, not that we are suggesting that a team member is abusing that situation, or that by any means the admin is for any case, but we just want to make sure that teachers feel valued, and we're looking at reasons, why are people leaving? Why are people, and this is absolutely one of those reasons that they tell us time and time again, anecdotally, I'm overwhelmed, workload, I'm picking up the slack of others all the time, and a couple, $6.25 on my paycheck every time it happens doesn't count, doesn't help at all.
I just want to ask, is the opposition come to the monetary increase coming directly from financial services?
Not entirely. I think it's just certainly a variable that we're looking at in terms of the overall package. But again, as you noted, Mr. Wigala, many of these proposals, not all, few of the proposals, have a financial, alignment to it. So again, I hope that by March 21st, which is our next meeting, or in the interim, we get an idea where we're at with what we could do financially, number one, for the staff during the 1920 school year, and how we could kind of start discussing some of these items. I mean, I don't want to jump ahead and steal Mr. OJ's thunder in terms of his presentation, but that's something we're going to have to look at. If we could do this but not support this particular increase or salary compensation piece, then that's something that we'll have to discuss.
Can I make a request for the March 21st meeting that financial services comes with a total number of the budget, like a monetary value that they are planning on using for salary purposes for the next, and I guess I'm being Confer number. So I guess what I'm looking for is a complete, and where the money's coming from, the amount of money that is going to be spent and that the district is wanting to spend, and where that money in the pots that's coming from, so that we can take a look at these proposals and make an educated decision on that. Because part of the frustration, I think, right now, at least for my team, is that we have spent some time, and myself have spent a lot of time with AEA going over this budget and finding places where money is, and then I feel like it's a really easy pivot to say, Mr. OJ's not here, financial services isn't here, we can't, I can't speak to that, and that's why my suggestion came up earlier, is that if we're negotiating about things that have monetary value, which is the purpose of meeting Confer, if you look at the scope, there's no one here to talk to us about that, and that is very frustrating.
Okay. So next on the agenda, as we continue, is length of school day, 5.1. And I want to have on the team members, I've got to take a quick break.
Can we leave the conversation 5.1?
Oh, sure.
Please. And then I'll be right back.
Elsa, it's still not working, the sound's on. I don't know, or is there anything we could do at this point? The other number is like messaging me. Do anything.
Okay, I think to share the counter proposal, I'll just read through as we, it's short enough, I think that we can just read it in its entirety to determine the spirit of the counter proposal. So what we're proposing is the standard teacher workday shall be 7 hours, 40 minutes, including lunch. We support starting and ending times for both students and teachers should be reviewed and approved by educational services and information services at the beginning of the school year, and with the approval of educational services, may be modified after the start of the school year. And then we recommend striking the length of the school day will be consistent until we can determine, it sort of goes back to that autonomy piece, but what we're stating to close is just what's been in the language. The length of the school day would not apply in the case of a school and half-day session.
Just to add to that, when when we met with that team and went over it, I expressed that part of the concern coming from the teacher side was the equitable prep time. And so I think we were hoping we could even put maybe language in here about regardless of grade level. If you have extended contact time with students, then you should get equitable prep time. It should be based on your contact time. Because my understanding is we may have a site right now where teachers are having extended contact time, but their prep time is not equitable with that. And all that the administrator said, if you're teaching a certain amount of time, you should have equitable prep time.
Can I ask a question? From my quick read here, my understanding essentially is everything in this proposal was rejected. Basically, everything in the proposal was rejected. The only thing that looks like it'll be changing based on the original language is educational services. There's no requirement for schools to have consistent times. There's no requirement for them to start after a certain time. Basically, the only thing that changed was who is setting the schedule, correct?
Yeah, the language, the bullet points, yes, those we struck all of those, but I wouldn't say that we struck everything in the new language that was added with that second sentence, the third sentence actually. So in your original proposal, you say starting and ending times. That whole section, the last part of that paragraph, the only thing that we took out was that it would be established by educational services, stating that it would be reviewed and approved, and taking out the criteria of the length of the school day.
So our concerns with this is that this is not strong language in terms of the concerns that we raised. Educational services, nothing in here ties them to observing consistent start and end times throughout the district. And it also, in here, we said may not be modified. This allows educational services to modify the schedule throughout the school year. Really, all of the concerns that we brought up there's nothing in here that it would require the district to have consistent times, right? So one school could have an hour longer than another school based on this language, and that's our concern, right? Our original concern is that we do have a school that has 35 minutes longer that their students go to school than any other school in the district in terms of elementary schools. And this language does not protect that from happening. Now I understand maybe the rationale, and I hope I'm not assuming here, is that educational services would ensure that that doesn't happen. But the thing, and the purpose of language in the handbook is to ensure that these things do not happen in the future, and that we are protecting our students and teachers from things that may be negative to the working conditions or to the classroom environment. So for example, at this particular school, we have first graders going to school the same amount of time as a 7th or an 8th grader. I don't think that that's good for first graders. I don't know if there's some rationale behind that, but we want to protect that, and we want it in the language so that it is strong and that it is clear.
One school in particular who did add to their day very late, it was after teachers arrived, I think it was before school started. This new language would address that. They would not be able to change their instructional day without having that reviewed and approved before. And then there's another school I know that has changed their start and end time for some students, and that's based on a study from their own community. And so I think that if we allow for some of that flexibility and autonomy of schools to do what's best for their community, this language doesn't compromise that. It's not captured here, but in our proposal for the prep minutes, we're very much in favor of, if you're extending the instructional minutes for teachers, you also need to extend the amount of prep time afforded to them. So it would need to be consistent. So what doesn't change is that the professional day does not change. It's 7 hours and 40 minutes. The instructional day for students, if it does change, then constitutes or impacts the prep minutes that a teacher would receive based on those instructional minutes. So if you do have first graders who are going to a school about the same amount of time as middle schoolers, those teachers will receive the same amount of prep time that those middle school teachers would receive.
Malika was speaking to the chair. So it's just to make sure that we're clear. And so it's my understanding that we should be expecting a counter proposal to the classroom proposed change of prep time, so that would be reflective. Perfect. Okay, that part makes sense. Now, as far as I'm looking at, just making sure I'm getting a clear understanding of this, I'm looking at the new current language versus the old language. And in the old language, it's strong, it very weakly states, but it does state that under no circumstances pretty much should the schedule be changed throughout the year. And in this current language, it says that it may be modified with the approval of educational services. Now, according to this current language, it also doesn't state the amount of times that they could change it. So if educational services wanted to, they could change it 10 times throughout the year. That's our concern. The whole entire point of having the language is so that there's the reason why we wanted the intent, or one of the intents of making sure the language was clear, was so that it wouldn't be modified at all. And now they're able to modify it within a limited amount, basically, is what this currently, what your proposal is suggesting. Whether or not it wasn't that was the intent or not, it could be read as such. So that's a concern for us.
And I know we're trusting that common sense would play a part in this, but I believe it would be too limiting to say that this couldn't be changed after the school year begins, because there might be circumstances where, hey, based on our current reality, we didn't foresee something happening, but now we're bound to following this for the remainder of the year. It just allows that a circumstance has come about that warrants a change. It's not one principal saying, hey, this is what I want to do without a study or without approval, but hey, district leadership, here's the circumstances on our campus, and we are proposing or asking for your approval to change the instructional minutes or the instructional times on this campus for these reasons. It would then allow them to do that.
So I think my understanding of the current process of schools approving their schedules is already submitting them through educational services. Is that not true? Don't schedules have to be approved at the beginning of the school year?
So I've received inconsistent messages with that and responses, not formal, but just in talking to people. So that's why we wanted to streamline the process or make it more clear. And that if you notice, not only did we put ed services, but we put information services. And we got that from Ms. Heck in our meeting last week or a few days ago with the administrators, where they mentioned that many times they have to follow up with Fran Watson. I'm just name dropping only because, as you know, Mr. Watson oversees that particular information services piece, where he looks at the calculated number of minutes, the ADM, ADA, and all the above, and working with the state in terms of the minutes per instructional minutes and the minutes per the daily minutes, and the weekly minutes. Hence, if you go back to the Red for Ed movement, there was some, districts, it was all across the board, and sir, because you live there.
I want to press here. How are school schedules approved now? Because I feel like someone at that table needs to know the answer to that.
Okay. And I don't know that answer right now.
No one, Ms. Heck, how do you get your school schedule approved at the beginning of the school year?
I can speak to this year. I know we turned our master schedule into educational services, and we also turned it into informational services. And I know informational services sends it to ADD, so they make sure we've got we're meeting the minimum number of required minutes. That was this year. Prior to this year, we may have only turned into informational services. But, and just to clarify, from the administrator meeting, I don't think that there's a school who is opposed to having an outline process about what that approval would look like or what might need to be constituted to submit to get it changed. I don't think we're looking to not have accountability for our actions or changing. I just think what I heard from the team specifically was able to have some autonomy based on their demographics, their community, and the needs of the school.
So the point I was making here is that the answer to my question, this educational services and informational services did approve schedules last year, was my understanding. I asked the question because I think there's a flaw in the argument that this is going to protect anything from happening again, because educational services approved schools that had schedules that were much longer than other schedules. That already happened. We're trying to stop that from happening.
If I can interject here, I think we want the same thing to happen because we didn't strike this piece. The original language was so brief it didn't address any kind of approval. And as I pointed out a few meetings ago, those bullet points are published, but it's not our practice. So what we have published as a district doesn't align with the practices on our schools. That's an issue. So if educational services now is brought in there, which we support that language, it gets us back to a greater sense of accountability, if you will, for schools to follow a process. And schools who may have acted on their own to determine school schedules, possibly outside the support of educational services, now would be more bound to that practice. So I say I want to simplify it, I don't need to oversimplify it, but really what we're wanting is, I think what this language captures is, one, there's no change to the length of the teacher's professional day, 7 hours and 40 minutes. No school will be able to implement a change without going through that approval process, because now it's in writing, and those changes will not impact the teacher's total work day because they will have additional prep.
Just to address that, a couple of possibly clarifying questions and then also commentary. So it is my understanding that educational services will need to approve it, and there's more than likely going to be a process. We don't know what that might look like yet. And there's no word or language in here that also states that teachers have say in that process either, which is something that is concerning to me, and I'm sure it's to the team. And my other concern is, or I should say question, I'm curious as to what emergencies or need that might arise in the middle of the year or after the school year has started that would constitute the change of the schedule. That's my question.
I know that a couple
that would come to my mind, and they don't happen often, but if a situation arose with the building, with a particular facility, plumbing, God forbid a fire, something where we have to basically, I don't want to say double sessions, but do something in particular to modify schedule. That's happened before in previous districts I've been in. One, traffic. I know traffic's a nightmare as it is, but let's say all of a sudden there's a major, city of Phoenix is gonna go under and go right through 51st Avenue. It's gonna go down to, it seems like it's one lane already these days, but I mean, to a single lane, and I mean, things like that would come to mind. Again, you just never know. The other piece of this is I do wanna just quickly mention that aside from the matter that we're dealing with right now, we do have a situation, an anomaly, if you will, and I think there's probably some other areas that we need to refine in terms of our scheduling, but aside from that, I don't want to say outlier, but that anomaly, we have really changed schedules that I know, I've only been here short 2 years, that I know after the school year has begun. And I think I mentioned this last time that we have to be sensitive, our administrators are sensitive, and talking to them just a few days ago that, I mean, anytime you change it, and again, it's the city of Phoenix, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 8 minutes, that changed your whole course of action in the morning and in the afternoon, in terms of traffic control, in terms of childcare, in terms of all these other elements, and we get that. But again, I don't want to just fixate on that. I just want to bring that up as something that we're sensitive to.
In adding to what Dylan is saying, as far as the length of school day and that the community is expressing the need to want to change it to extend their day. I'd like to just also point out that there's a reason why the young ones, the small ones, are not in school at the same amount of time that our middle schoolers are, and that studies have shown that that's not beneficial to young kids. And I think we as, local parents, we are acting as their parents, that we also have to take into consideration that we're trying to do what is truly best for kids. And I think Dylan that's what he's completely speaking to here. I might be speaking to more or less, notifying teachers and having teacher buy-in, having community buy-in, and those kinds of things. That seems to be my argument. But I know what Dylan is speaking to here is doing what's best for kids and what works well with kids and extending their time in school. Not sure that that's a good enough reason, even though we're giving teachers their time. And I love that you guys are thinking about that and taking that into consideration, and that makes me, very happy and excited. However, I think what we're looking at is what's best for kids in this situation. And I'm just not sure that's what is.
That was kind of what I wanted to bring up, is that, again, educational services, which I believe was in that process, did approve something that I don't believe was good for kids, and that CEA doesn't believe was good for kids. There are different required minutes and time and hours for elementary students and middle school students for a reason. And the language we're trying to propose is to be proactive, right? Because you think, 5-10 years down the line, I'm certainly not going to be at this table still, and a lot of you over there probably won't be either. And what we should be thinking about is, okay, so how can we protect ourselves and protect students and make sure that we are setting forth the best possible way to run things? And I think that's the importance of those bullet points, is that starting and ending at the same time for elementary and middle schools ensures that maybe there's a way we can word it, is that maybe they're not starting at the same time or ending at the same time, but students are going to school at the same time. I think that's a possibility that we would consider for a counter. And also, I would consider, and I'm speaking on behalf of the team here, adding the word emergency and maybe defining what an emergency might look like. In terms of modifying the school schedule. But I think it's important, we keep talking about this 6th grade possible movement and reorganization. One of the things that parents have brought up is, at least to my understanding, is that they don't like having different pickup and end times. So I think this puts some solidity into that, because 6th grades, if they did stay at the middle school, would have to have the same schedule as the rest of their school, so there's not extra pickup times. But also, if you're transferring schools in the district, you don't have to change your schedule and maybe go to a charter school. You can transfer to a school that starts ends at the same time as yours. And I think that those are some things that we should consider, because we are talking about enrollment. And these language this isn't strapping completely the autonomy, because if the school starts at 8:33 and the school starts at 8:30, that's not a huge difference. But this language would make that happen, but that's not taking a big part of autonomy away. I'm not an administrator, so maybe I can't speak to that, but I would question that is this really, is the benefits that go along with this, such as protecting the amount of time students are in school, and the amount of time that teachers are teaching students, outweigh the autonomy that is the concern of the district?
I can just share a couple of personal experiences. In answer to your question, what might prompt a change, I think Jose did a good job explaining, but it actually happened when I was a principal. We constantly, there's a late bus, wait to do your attendance, there's a late bus. And if that is pervasive and continues, you may then say, you know what, there's no way this bus is going to be here. Looking at the statistics and the data that over the last 4 weeks, we're going to have to either allow students to be 15 minutes late without being marked tardy, or possibly look at changing, if it would be appropriate. When they first rolled out breakfast in the classroom, different principals went to their staff and came up with solutions about how to best support breakfast in the classroom. And a colleague said, we're going to, on that campus, they elected as a staff, they went to a vote, they built consensus to determine, the will of the group, and that was to no longer send kids to recess. We would prefer to have them in our classroom where we can supervise while they're eating their breakfast. And so rather than be at recess from 7:45 to 8, they were in the classroom. So don't go to recess. It's a tremendous waste of time to have kids get to campus, go out to the recess, 10 minutes later, call them back in, now start serving breakfast. We can really maximize the amount of support that we give to these students. And it wasn't necessarily adding the length of the day to the student. And I know we are talking about, a school who's asking for instruction to occur, but that would be an example of a school who's adding 15 minutes, where we would like your kid to arrive now at 7:45 so they can come in and start breakfast right away, and then we can start our instruction at 8 o'clock. On my campus, when we had that conversation, it was very different, and so we didn't go that route. There was the third school who said, we're going to do breakfast in the classroom, but we're going to do breakfast in the classroom in the cafeteria. Because the way our campus is set up, it's going to be very difficult for the food to be delivered and broken down and classrooms cleaned up. It was much more feasible and advantageous, but again, it's the culture of your school. But they opted for it, and we came up with a myriad of different methods to do that, and some of it didn't extend the time. It extended the time the students were in the classroom, but wasn't necessarily adding to the instructional day. And so, why do I say strike these bullets? Either adhere to the bullets that would have been there, and do it like you say you're doing it, or take this away and be clear in what you are doing. So either follow this or be very clear in what you are doing, have that pre-approved and communicated up front, rather than putting us in the situation that we are today with nobody being clear on who's doing what where.
So, Mr. Wagella, in the spirit of time, we know we often talk of that, but we do have, we've gone through 4 proposals of the night. I do want to give Dr. Murphy, if you don't mind, Dr. Murphy, I know he did work on a particular counter. So if you don't mind, can we move to that one?
I think that is a good idea, and then with the idea that we're going to be coming back to this.
That would be 6.3 transfer, is that correct, Dr. Murphy?
Yes.
I have copies, sir, so if you'd like to, there you go.
So we're jumping to 6.3.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Arenas, for consideration. To look at this, I did promise I'd have it, so here it is, hot off the press. Okay, counter proposal to change to involuntary transfer. Initially, your proposal changed the definition of transfer We're opposed to changing the definition of transfer. Transfer means movement from one facility to another within the district, but does not apply to a change in assignment within a facility, classroom, grade level, or subject area, so we're proposing to leave that the same. Voluntary transfer provisions. Under 2, we're good with online. 3, we already talked about taking assignment out of there. Teachers may apply to transfer to another facility for the following year through the transfer application process. 5, we're good with that with a little added language. Teachers on an improvement plan are not eligible to participate in the transfer application process unless it's determined by the district, the affected teacher, and what we added was, and both principals, to be beneficial for both parties. So if everyone agrees, yeah, we're good with that. Some administrators will have the opportunity to review the transfer request and are required to consider holding interviews with teachers seeking voluntary transfers. It's not reasonable, and I would not feel at all comfortable going back to principals and saying, now you have to spend, I don't know how many hours this could be, but considering the number of people that put in for a voluntary transfer and the number of people who put in that they would transfer to any other campus, all of a sudden then there's, 19 hours of interviews. Principals are extremely busy. It creates a situation in which there's a required interview when principals, it simply puts an unrealistic burden and creates a ton of interviews that sap principal time. I would like to say they will look at these, they will consider holding interviews, but to force principals to hold multiple hours of interviews impedes our progress in actually staffing the schools. And one of the pitfalls I've seen in neighboring districts over the years has been that they spend so much time on their own internal transfer process, it impedes their actual staffing process. While I value the internal transfer process, I also, as an HR officer, recognize internal transfer does nothing to help us staff our district. All it does is move people around on the checkerboard. I realize that could be beneficial, but it doesn't help us staff. Okay, so involuntary transfer provisions under B. To clarify, this is after the first contract, the day of the school year. I think we'd agree on that. 3, the district will first ask eligible staff for volunteers to transfer. We're opposed to offering a $1,000 bonus check. I'm not philosophically opposed in a sense, but it would make it easier to get volunteers, but I don't think it's fiscally responsible at this time. 4, if there are an insufficient number of volunteers to transfer, the district will transfer staff based on the RIF rubric, which is GCQAR. Kind of like your concept of using that. And we already said we'd strike that second sentence and struck through. The RIF rubric will be applied at the affected grade level. Teachers new to the district will be granted 40 points, which is the affected performance level for the evaluation component of the rubric. If you don't do that, you're really right back to seniority, because if a teacher doesn't have evaluation and they have no points out of 40 possible, we're right back to seniority and all, there's no point in using the RIF rubric. So you would assume that new people, new to the district and new teachers would be at an effective level and spot them 40 points, and I think the RIF rubric would be very useful. It would give us a clearly defined criteria that we haven't had before, so I like that. Staff that's transferred involuntarily would be compensated with $500. Again, the monetary aspect of that is difficult to deal with. I think it's just part of a professional contractual obligation. It'd be recognized there are times when it's necessary. Not that we want to not take into consideration the virtual efforts of staff, but it's irresponsible if we don't deploy our resources in the way to best provide educational program for our students. And then 6, pretty good with that. Teachers notified of transfer after the beginning of the contract period be compensated upon request. 5, upon request is what we want to leave in. 5, non-instructional working days during instructional hours, and then you strike into the language and then said the new activities may include time to pack up the room, unpack and set up the new room and observe. That's fine. We just thought upon request makes more sense rather than mandating that, if a teacher says, hey, I'm ready to roll, I hate to mandate they have to take 5 days if they, don't need that. That seems to be kind of I don't know, it kind of builds in a feather bedding kind of quality to the thing. The rule requires I have to take 5 days. Well, you can have it if you need it, but if you don't need it, you don't have to. So, the rationale, briefly, we oppose creating a stipulative definition of transfer, which is contrary to current usage policy and law. Requiring principals to interview every internal transfer candidate is unreasonable, places an unrealistic burden on principals' already limited time. Principals will review and consider applications of all candidates applying to transfer to their school. Monetary rewards for volunteering to transfer or being transferred involuntarily are not fiscally responsible at this time. The district has an obligation to deploy its resources in a way that best serves the educational program for our students. So I would submit there's quite a bit of common ground there, and I like a lot of what you've done. A couple things we're adamantly opposed to, but I would submit that represents a reasonable counter that would move us forward in some of those areas. Thank you.
So I think that we have an agreement on the interviews. Didn't want to interrupt you, but I thought we made that clear last time that we didn't really
Good.
consider the protocol and how many transfers there were because we didn't have that information.
Good.
But I do have a question with number 5. It says both principals. So I just am curious as to why both principals and not just the principal that would be receiving the transfer. So why would the principal of the school that they're leaving have a say?
I think that came from, and typically we want to include that principal as a matter of due respect to them, and we always want them to be informed, and I think, help me with that, because I think the team really helped me in coming up with that.
I think,
I think part of it, obviously certification is a big piece. Part of it was the SEI compliance pieces. The other part was that, and again, this is respectful of gender in terms of balance. Sometimes, especially with our elective teachers, again, we're talking different, apples and oranges, but in terms of chemistry, strengths that a person may bring, and that's what that was about. It's not negative, it's more positive in terms of some of the skill sets, in terms of certifications, endorsements, and that they may have.
Okay. And then again, in the rationale, and I'm going to keep bringing this up because it's cited in the rationale, not fiscally responsible at this time. So an estimated cost would be something that you could have provided in the rationale as we've done on our proposals. And we don't have access to how many involuntary transfers there are. And I'm just, where are we getting?
Well, I could elaborate further on that. I didn't put it down, but honestly, it's really part of your contractual obligation to be willing, as I said, when there are occasions when it's in the best interest of the educational program to move a teacher. That is, teacher at school A has, twice as many kids in her class as the staffing standard, and at school B, at that same grade level, somebody has, six kids or we have totally under-enrolled. It's not responsible on the district's part to, even though people never want to move, it's one of those cases where we can't really let personal preference triumph over district educational needs and needs of students. So it seems to me, aside from the fiscal part of it, it's part of being professional, it's part of professional responsibility, and it's part of that give and take that we have as we work collegially as professionals. So the fact that the deck is stacked against the administration, because every time we do staffing, as we just went through, we're basing that on the best numbers we have. But it's an educated guess. So to hold the administration to that standard that, you have to be perfect in your staffing, you can't move anybody, or you're going to have to, pay a monetary penalty. I guess, philosophically, that's a little bit of an issue too. I can go into that in the rationale, but so yeah, that's part of the concern. We're coming from a choice of fiscal, and again, I'll let you ask for Mr. OJ. You're going to get a full dose of Mr. OJ next session, and probably beyond that. But just knowing the numbers in terms of our dramatic enrollment decline suggests, it might be nice to say, wow, volunteers will give you a grand. It's like the airlines. Hey, you take another flight, we'll give you, other stuff. It might be nice. It kind of would make it easier, for me, more palatable. But, I'm just thinking, knowing as much as I know now, and we can let him, talk to these other things, I'm just not sure giving that kind of a bonus is fiscally responsible at this time.
So I just will point out that I would imagine that number, because I think Mr. Arenas kind of alluded that it was a small number that was involuntary transferred. And so if the rationale is fiscal responsibility, I would argue that that number is very small, and as I pointed out, there are some places in the budget for us to fund things like this. And I know if our concern is enrollment, and enrollment's down, that does not mean that staffing stays the same for next year, and that we don't make cuts at certain places, right? So I just really want the district to consider the things that we currently already have in terms of things that are pulling from our M&O budget, such as matching 301 money for assistant superintendents, matching 301 money from administration, family gold plan for administration. When we're talking about these things, we're talking about benefiting the bottom level. And I hope that when we do talk about cuts, if we're going to talk about cuts and where budget is going to be allocated, that we look at the top. Because the people that are making things move on the ground level are the people in our schools. And the idea of this was not a significant financial thing, but it's this idea that if I sign a contract, I understand that the way the contract reads is that we could essentially be placed wherever the district wants to place us. We didn't propose language that alters that. All we're proposing is that the district looks at providing equitable funds to people who are being moved against their will. And I don't think that that's a ridiculous thing, and I also think that that's a really friendly thing the district could have. And as I've mentioned, the budget does, the weighted student count is affected by the teacher experience index. And if we want teachers to stay here, we want people to think Cartwright is the most friendly district to teachers. This is, I think, a very small ask. I mean, really, what we're looking at, like $20,000 maybe. I don't know if there's been more than 20, especially under the new language that you have here. It takes away our assignment transfer rather than a facility. I'm sure there's a lot more assignment transfers in the school than a facility, but it's really small. So I think it's really strong language to say not fiscally responsible when there are so many pots that this could come off and would barely put a dent in them.
Maybe I'm just too old and have too traditional a view, but it's almost like, there's a time when the district needs you to step up and do something. And I've been asked over my, many decades in education, the district needs you to do this, and I've said, okay, I'll do it. So it seems to me that's part of being a professional adult. Okay, so that's just my view.
Maybe it wasn't intended this way, Dr. Murphy, but I think that that felt like a personal thing because I'm clearly the youngest person in this room. And I don't think it's that. I think it's thinking about how do we treat our labor? How do we treat our employees? That's what it's about. It's not about me being young. It has nothing to do with that. I mean, this is a simple request of let's pay our employees if we're going to tell them mid-year you have to transfer. So I think that was a little unfair, and I want to call you out on that because I don't think that was appropriate.
I'm not singling you out. I was referring to myself and my traditional values and my view. I'm just being honest with you that it just seems a little bit over the top that we're going to give out bonuses when we're in a position where we need to do something for the benefit of educational program. And sometimes, people need to step up and do that and not necessarily always need to be compensated for it. So there's nothing personal in terms of my comment. I'm talking about my own bias, not referencing anybody over there.
So my own thing for me is that I believe that it's really important to treat our employees well. I also think that things like this go a lot further away than giving assistant superintendents matching 301 money or 10% performance pay. So when we're talking about the budget and we're talking about the future and we're looking at where we're going to cut, I hope we're considering cutting from all areas if that's going to be the case. And, particularly the top. And I know we're not talking budget cuts, and I have the funds for this, but I just think if we're talking about where our values are, we're already giving bonuses to people who make the most money in our district, and we're asking for someone to be compensated for being moved mid-year against their will.
So, in terms of time, let's go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just really feel like I need to express these, because maybe you can speak to this later on or when we discuss this later. I have two concerns. One of which is I can speak to myself personally. I was told that I was going to be moved involuntarily to a different assignment within the school. Luckily, it was in the school. Thank goodness. I'm really appreciative of that. However, it wasn't taken into consideration that I spent thousands, hundreds of dollars, I don't know if thousands, but throughout this year I've spent thousands of dollars, hundreds with the start of my new class, and therefore doubling it again when I had to take on a new role. That is not fiscally responsible for my pocketbook and for my kids and for the benefit of my students. And that is why we asked for extra compensation. And we gave a little bit more, maybe we're a little bit flexible on the 1,000 per se, but we gave a little bit more to incentivize those teachers to who want to move, who would move. I know that if I was told I would get a certain amount of money if I would move voluntarily, that was the major issue for me. If I had just spent hundreds of dollars, well, two, I should say, my kids, leaving my kids was very hard for me because I already had fallen in love with them. The second reason was monetarily. I already make peanuts. I've taken whatever money I could sacrifice for that beginning of the year to start of the year. And then now you're telling me I have to do it all over again for a whole group of new kids that I actually have, that hurt me and has actually put me into debt because of that. So it's a hardship. And it may not be fiscally responsible per se for the district, but to ask me to go into debt because of it is a very, very hard thing to do, and that's essentially what you're asking other teachers to do when they are transferred, whether involuntary or not. The second thing that I'd like to point out is that I really do appreciate you entertaining the referee, Rick. That's what we made it for. My concern is in the fact that we are giving any kind of teacher a kind of a head start. 1, 2, 3, go! And then now you can start, go. It's not necessarily a fair and equal way to determine things. And also, secondly, performance level in as far as your evaluation goes is super confidential. and putting this rating on there and giving a head start, it's making it people more evident of people's ratings versus a total, when you look at the RIF rubric and you're looking at the total of points, it's a little more confidential on what your rating is, but whenever you give somebody an extra 40 points for whether they're high, therefore the teacher who didn't get the effective performance level isn't gonna get that 40 points, and now we all know they're not effective. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think that's puts it makes it not confidential as much when you add the 40 points on there because they're highly effective. What if I have a teacher who's not effective and they're a new teacher? Now we all know they're not, so they don't get that extra 40 points.
Okay, all I was looking for was something to solve the problem that if you have a new teacher who doesn't have an evaluation, the RIF rubric was designed to RIF people. By definition, that means they already have a job. So it's set up with that as a major component. So if you don't have, I would entertain any other mechanism you can come up with to compensate for that. But to not allow for that at all, it just gets you right back into seniority because the person's going to be 40 points lower than everybody else, and all we're going to be doing then is moving the newest person.
What if we use something like an average or something along those lines, right? So the new educator would receive the average of the RIF. I know I'm just kind of spitballing here, but I think we can look into this and talk about this and think about it over the next couple of weeks before we meet again.
And just thinking quickly, in response to that, as I think about that distribution across the district, the vast majority, super majority of our teachers are going to fall every year consistently into the effective rate. So that's not a bad suggestion. We could look at that if we used an average. So, but again, we don't want to. There are all kinds of things on that RIF rubric that we might not want to advertise publicly. It does need to be confidential, so the principal needs to work with the teacher in filling that out. There's a thing on there about if you've had a reprimand or whatever, it can, take points off. So we don't want to, while that's a factor, we don't want to, bring that up publicly and embarrass people, obviously. So, okay, so we can, I think we're going to work on that, but maybe we get to use the RIF rubric for something after all these years. After all that work, thank you.
So folks, is the messenger one of two chairpersons? It is 6:35. We've gone through 5 of the 9 proposals, so I think we've at least provided not only a discussion but some counters and cases here that we agreed on one. We signed off on one representation piece. Meantime, as we prepare to move forward, we know that Mr. OJ will be here March 21st to present the financial piece, and as we've said more than one time, so the spirit I won't repeat, we know that that's a big piece to some of these proposals. Before we go on to letter G, other information.
I would be okay with letter G is that adjourning.
No, it's other information.
Information. I don't know if this is relevant now, but before we leave, I would just like to say a few things, and that's it.
So you want to do that other information then?
And we can do other information, and then
Okay.
before we adjourn.
Okay, so we're now on letter G, other information, future items that are important discussion. This would be the place to do. Oh, I'm sorry. No, wait. I'm sorry. There's one more. There's, how about, okay, so other information. That's any future agenda items. I think it goes without saying that we're going to continue this conversation, but anything from the... Okay.
For other information, and my request is February 3rd, I submitted some questions to financial services. I followed up in person. I followed up at email recently. I'm just hoping to get answers to those questions soon so we can have updated budget information and when we are making our salary package proposal, we would like for it to be educated and to be thought out and to be able to tell you exactly where the money comes from. And as soon as possible, because we do need some time to prepare as well.
Okay. Next is letter H, Shogala and respective teams. Announcement of future meeting date and other routine information concerning Confer process. So this is the item before adjournment.
So I need to speak, and hopefully my thing that I'm reading my team here is that we will be leaving this meeting frustrated. I do appreciate getting counter proposals, although it seems that every single counter proposal we had very significant parts of it struck from the counters. And I do feel that as an association, we do have a duty to our membership to push for these items. And we are going to do that. And I just want it to be aware that we are going to be, I want you to know that we're going to be informing our members of what our arguments are and why we think they're strong. And that's something that we have to do as an association. We definitely have the interest of bargaining in good faith, and we will continue to do that. But I would like to see more movement from the district on a lot of things. And I think that we are bringing up some good points. And I think that some of this stuff that we're coming to common ground on, but it's really tough when anything that is financial is just said, okay, we can't afford it right now. And nobody at the table can address that very clearly. And I understand that Mr. Ojai is coming at the next meeting. But we put a lot of work into these and where the money could come from and so forth. And I really hope that over the next 3 weeks, there's some consideration and moving on some of these. And I don't know if my team has anything to add, but I do look forward to working with you. But it does, in my opinion, I feel like this could be working a little bit better. We spent a lot of times talking about the same things again, yet I will point out again, a lot of the language that we had that was important and significant was removed from the counter proposals.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, I'd like to.
We've worked very hard to craft counter proposals. And sometimes it's very difficult based upon what we see as common ground. I'm sorry you're not more impressed with our counter proposals. We can only deal with what we can agree to. So as strong and as, strong as Joey supports some of these things, equally on this side, if we don't feel we can live with them, we're not going to be able to sign off. So we're trying to find common ground. But it seems to me that's the nature of the negotiation process, is that give and take back and forth. So, you ask for counters, you got counters. I recognize you'd like the counters better if they had, more of your things left in there. But we went through a very conscientious process. Janet had, invited all the principals in, had a meeting. We've had team meetings. We've looked at this. So it's not that we're not, attempting to be collaborative, but, at some point, I think we have to realize, as we do, as we come to every year at this table, we're going to agree on a lot of things, and some things we're not going to agree on, no matter, how strongly, either side might feel about them. So, I'm sorry I'm frustrated. We tried to, do our best to counter in a reasonable way.
I think to kind of explain the frustration more is that it's about rationale, and it's about reasoning and arguments, and I understand that there are some arguments. I guess I would ask is, have you been talking to teachers? They're the ones that we need in this district. That's the shortage. That's where we make students better, is in the classroom. And that's something that I believe that we do pretty well on our side. And I think evidence of that is the 500 signatures and so forth. But the thing is that I feel like some of the arguments that are being made on the other side, and I don't know how else to say this, but I feel like this is the feedback I've got from the people watching. They don't feel like we're being listened to, and they don't feel that our ideas are really being considered. And at some point as an association, we need to make sure that our members are heard in that, and that's all I'm saying is that I want to tell you this, is that that's the feedback I'm getting for the people who are watching, is that they feel that way, and I at the table, I also feel that way. And I want to come together on things and come to conclusions on things, but it truly doesn't feel like some things, because what happens if you don't want something? What happens? With the procedure, there's no procedure outline for it. If you don't sign on to something, it's just, what happens to it?
Mhm.
Nothing.
It's the nature of the process.
So what if we don't sign? What happens?
You don't move forward.
Ultimately, what we're gonna do is take all these things and report
The progress we have and share that with the governing board, okay? And then we'll get further direction from them. So I would submit, we're still early in the process, and I recognize the frustration on the finance part, but again, because of the way back when Mr. OJ used to sit here for every session, and then we decided he'd come in as a consultant. So from now on, he'll be part of that. So, and I would, ask him in terms of addressing your other questions. So, I'm sorry about that frustration early on here. I think our overarching view has been, we need to be kind of careful on what we commit to, because we know, funds are tied to students and student loss is significant. So,
I guess my concern is that it is not uncommon for school districts to negotiate, and maybe this is something we can look into it's not uncommon in other places for the union and the other team to have to go to mediation, to have to go to arbitration. And I know there's no language that we have that would make any of that to happen, but I'm just saying, there has got to be, I feel like there should be something more than just, no, we're not going to sign it, and then it disappears.
So, Mr. Miguel, I've been pretty patient. I think you've all been pretty patient. That's okay. That's
I
okay.
think you're moving to adjourn.
I haven't made the motion yet, because I want to make a quick final statement. That is that, again, sir, I want to be very honest here, and that is that this should not, and we don't want it to be an adversarial situation, one. We don't want to be positional, two, and we certainly don't want to be in a situation where we're posturing. We understand, you've been candid, you've been upfront, you've been very transparent about your frustration. Again, we're representing a cohort of administrators and the administrative teams, and again, yours truly is the liaison right now, and yours truly is representing the board, and the will of the board is we move forward. So do not misinterpret this by saying I'm speaking for board member A, B, C, or D. That's not what I'm doing, but I know that our marching duties are to represent, and we certainly, I think we've done everything we could to be, we've listened, but we are about teachers. We are about employee groups. We are about classified support staff, and I do know about other experiences that I've been involved with. So again, I just hope that part of the and you're right, there's some things that probably need to be tweaked. I'd be the first to say probably need, but I don't think we discuss those now because they take the time. I think that maybe offline, and I say that again, we're getting the right people involved. Bless you, so getting the right people involved as we move forward. But again, that's we have to live with the meet confer process right now as we move forward. I think that's just my feeling. Okay, so
Melanie Go speaking to the chair. I'd like to again reiterate Dylan's words and thank you for your counter proposals. We really appreciate it. We will absolutely be taking these back to our members, getting some information from them, seeing how they feel about them, and absolutely entertaining them, and hopefully bringing back a counter proposal, counter to possibly your counter proposals at next meeting. So thank you very much for your time.
So with that said, is there a motion to adjourn on the February 28th Confer meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Let's see, makes that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Wiggles seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Have a good evening. Drive safe.